I'm Madelyn Blair, and this is Unlocked, a show all about unlocking the resilient leader in you. Could I ask a favor before I start? If you like the show and you like what we do, the free, simple way to support us is to give us a thumbs up by hitting the like button. My commitment to you is that I will do everything in my power to make sure this show is better for you every single week. We'll listen to your feedback, we'll find the guest you want me to speak to, and we'll continue to do what we do. Thank you so much. On average, a person makes 33 to 35,000 decisions every day, as reported in the Harvard Business Review. Good decisions need both data and intuition. We make decisions every day. Some are simple and straightforward, like should I have scrambled eggs or poached? Some only look simple and straightforward. What are the 3 most important things I should do today that are sitting on my to-do list? Or maybe what tags should I use to make my article attractive? And some are very complex and anything but straightforward. Should I marry this person? Is it time for a job move? Should we bomb Iran? I recently heard on a podcast, I believe it was with Simon Sinek, a story about a shoe salesman who said that he always kept the number of shoes in front of the customer to 2. And if she would ask for a third option, he would always ask which shoe should he take back as he went to get the third. He said, if the customer had to make a decision between 2 pairs, they would tend to buy. But making a decision across 3, she almost never purchased a pair. Decisions are made all the time, yet we don't always know if we're making them well. Now, as I recall, when I was growing up, I was never given specific instruction on how to make a decision other than to observe how my mother made them. She was very rational and logical and generally made very good decisions. And so I hope I copy her now as I make decisions. Today, we'll explore how to tackle those decisions so that you can address them with more confidence and even creativity. And when I met today's guest, she talked about her book, How the Tin Man Found His Brain. How the Tin Man Found His Brain. I was intrigued simply by the title because I always thought that the Tin Man wanted a heart. It was the scarecrow who wanted a brain. So why did she write about the Tin Man finding his brain? Perhaps because he already had one but didn't use it? Let's find out. My guest today is Danute Debney Shaw. And do you want me to call you Danute or Debney?
Danute is just fine.
It's Danute. We leave off the E. All right. Her professional work includes a combined 30 years of management, organization, and federal law. Her work now is in the area of decision strategy innovation, enhancing your decision strategies using methods designed to bring out innovation. She speaks, writes, and consults privately for business, corporate, and personal development. She is a winner of the International Impact Book Award 2024 in Self-Help for How the Tin Man Found His Brain. Danute, welcome to Unlocked.
Thank you so much, Dr. Blair. I'm really delighted to be here on your show. I've seen some of your shows, and there's so much wonderful information you bring forward. I'm delighted to participate in that effort.
Oh, thank you. And please call me Madelyn.
Madelyn.
All right. Well, first of all, why the Tin Man?
Well, it's interesting. I have been intrigued with that story for a long time. And all of the characters in the Frank Braun books, which later, of course, became a movie, are characters that already had all of their own resources within them. They all had what they were looking for, and they didn't have a sense that of this fact. The Tin Man, of course, was looking for his heart. The Scarecrow was looking for his brain, and our brave, cowardly Lion was looking for his courage, which, of course, he always exhibited. And I started my trilogy. It will be a trilogy. I will be focusing on all those characters, but I started with the Tin Man and with the notion of these resources as an introduction, and also about the element of his brain and his heart being connected. It was all one. And as it is for all of us, we have that capability for integration. So I used that character to sort of start the stories off.
Fabulous. And I love that there's going to be a trilogy. Okay. In your book, you say that you asked a number of people if they consider themselves happy. Now, to me, happiness is a decision. You know, I see a man with no shoes and he says he's happy. And when I ask him, he says, well, because I have feet. Well, it's what, you know.
Yes. I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. Mm-hmm.
So how does this relate to decision making? I mean,
Well, it's part of an exploration that I was doing. In my book, first of all, I have to say a couple of things. I am not a psychologist. I'm not a sociologist. I am an attorney, a federal practice counsel. Have had all of the experience that you have mentioned, and I've had an opportunity to work with a lot of powerful people. When I say powerful, I mean subjectively powerful. And so it's brought to mind how they draw upon their resources, how I've drawn upon my resources, what the influences have been in decision making for all of us. And so I bring up the idea of happiness because I'll tell you exactly how this came up very quickly. I was traveling to another country, and in this country some years ago, everybody seemed happy. They literally were walking around kind of half smiling in this kind of zone. And I thought, why is everybody so happy? It's not a holiday. It's not, they're not all drinking in some kind of, celebration or festival. Right. And I just mingled among them, talked to them to see how they were sort of addressing why they're so happy. And they just seem to be embracing life. As you said, they've made a decision in their lives. This exactly is apropos of what you've brought into focus here. They have made the decision to really embrace everything that happens in life. And then when I came back home, I thought, well, I'm looking at people around me. And again, I can't draw a comparison for that whole country or our whole country. This is just a snippet, a casual observation that I bring to light here, that this is a decision that we make. And many of us don't make the decision to be happy. I mean, I'm sure that you will be able to attest in your own experience that not everybody you run into would say that they have a happy life, that they're living a happy life. And I asked it in just that general way. Not, are you happy today? Did you have a happy weekend? There was one woman that I met, which was very interesting. She actually kind of whispered to me and said, I have a very happy life. I don't say it too much because people are going through so much out there. And I said, well, what makes your life so happy? And she said, well, I enjoy my job. I'm in a marriage with a man I love. I mean, we have our ups and downs, of course, but it's a great life. We do a lot of things. We participate in a lot of community efforts. And so she kind of went on, and you could tell that infused and that informed who she was and how she presented to everybody. And interestingly enough, she really looked an awful lot like those people who I met in that other country. But I don't find that a lot of people make that kind of choice. Some of the people I did sort of casually ask about it when we were in conversation, informally, of course, they'd say things like, I guess I'm happy. Yeah, I guess I'm happy. And some people, of course, would outright say, nah, it's just been rough. It's been a rough life. But this was one of a few people, I think 2 or 3, who said that, yeah, I do have a good life. And so, as you mentioned, this is a decision. It's one of the big decisions that we make in all these little small ways along the way that constitute our life. But it comes from a fundamental choice that we make to make it a good life, whatever the possibilities or challenges are.
that's right. And I just loved your response. And I love the fact that I love the story. It so reminded me of my mother. She, she said to me one day, Madeline, I decided that I was going to be happy no matter what I was
Yeah.
doing. And by golly, she was. And I'm thinking about your country where you saw many people that way. I think sometimes when we are happy and we express that, whether it's simply because we're relaxed rather than
Yes,
anxious, that it feeds into the whole community.
absolutely. Sure. Absolutely.
We need to be more
Absolutely.
happy. That's all I can say.
Well, because it's hard to do that in a vacuum. If you are in a very difficult, challenging context. For example, I met a woman once. She'd spent 35 years taking care of her husband day and night. She was actually quite relieved when he passed and felt very guilty about it. And yet, she'd loved him. But this was 35 years of no me time. Essentially, she worked
Yeah.
and took care of him. So it is challenging. And as you say, gratitude. The gentleman who's happy he had feet, right? Whether he's got shoes or not. It's true. Being grateful is a great way to begin, coming from awareness of what it is that contributes to your life, constitutes your life. These are all important factors.
Okay. Well, let's get into the decision making. You must use some tools. Why don't you talk about some of those tools?
Well, actually, it's sort of three toolboxes, and there are certainly different tools in those boxes. Our rational thinking is what we usually focus on. It's what we're raised with more, or at least we believe we are. It's that deductive reasoning from a certain top premise to a second premise to an answer, an outcome, a conclusion. Right? That's our rational thinking from here to there. Therefore, such and such. This is a syllogistic form of rational reasoning, and it's the most common form of reasoning that we utilize. And I spend the least time focusing on that because this is something that's a little bit more familiar to everyone. Now, the tool of subjective awareness, and I call it that deliberately because it can be many elements. It can be imagination, inspiration, it can be intuition, it can be what we perceive. And many people think that when I talk about perception, it is just a question of something sort of psychic, a psychic perception. No, it's all of it. It's the five senses. And we sometimes underestimate what we can learn in perceiving through our five senses. You walk into a room sometimes and wouldn't you say, I mean, you walk into a room and you can feel the energy sometimes. You can even sometimes smell the fear when it becomes, for example, some kind of big board meeting or big, I've been to a lot of meetings. People say, oh, emotion, there's no place for emotion in the workplace. Well, maybe not screaming and crying and laughing, but generally these meetings do call upon emotion. There is a certain element of anticipation, of fear, of concern, of triumph. Sometimes there's all sorts of emotion that plays into all of this. And this is all part of our subjectivity. And certainly if we're doing a negotiation with someone, it's very helpful to have a real good reading of awareness on them. So these are elements of that subjectivity. And then, of course, creativity would be the third sort of almost subcategory of the rest of subjectivity. But creativity is almost its own corner because it's sort of like the conclusion of what you're aware of, both rationally and intuitively. And then, so what are you going to do about it? Does it require some kind of specific action or some modification? And therefore you can go into kind of a creative energy. That would be my thinking.
Oh, that's interesting. I have walked that line, that path, excuse me,
Mm-hmm.
that path many times. I never thought of that final choice as being a creative place. But of course it is. Of course it is. Because you may know three things, but in the end, it has to be a fourth thing that you choose. And you had to come
Right.
to that.
Right. It's that kind of, even being an accountant. People say to me, well, there are some areas where there's no real creativity. We don't want a creative accountant. But they can project financial planning often
Yes.
and give you indications for directions that you can take. And sometimes they can do that rather creatively by adding one point with another point, projecting out into a
Yeah.
distance. So there's creativity involved in virtually everything. Our day-to-day decisions, you mentioned how many decisions we make every day. Often there are some very creative decisions. I have a friend who knows 7 routes of how to get to work from her home.
Oh, good on her.
Exactly. Because she explored them, because she was open to them. Yes. So
Yes.
yes.
In today's traffic, one should know at least three.
At least, yes.
Oh,
So
well,
true. So
this is
true.
really interesting because what you're saying is these are tools that we really all have. I mean, we have our five senses. It's a question of awareness and bringing it in.
Exactly.
Okay, the logical stuff, maybe there's some things we can learn there about,
Hmm.
but certainly that intuitive side, yes, I love that.
Well, and it's a, it's an element that children often draw upon immediately.
Immediately.
As we know, kids are very receptive, very open, because they haven't shut down in any way yet. But often in the process of trying to grow up and trying to assimilate societally, yes, but also just as a matter of form of interaction in the world, often by being sort of put in the box of structure, because children need structure. You need to have some structure,
We all
right?
need structure.
We all need structure, exactly. But often as children, we kind of shut down some of that imagination. We are
Well, I
sometimes
think we shut
discouraged.
them down.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it happens. And some of it, this isn't to make, parents or teachers meanies or they're bad people, because they're trying to put children on a track and give them a certain discipline of thought.
Mhm.
And not all parents are that strict about it, but some are. And it forms the way we end up working in life, because we sort of started out that way and we keep going that way. And if
Yeah,
life works for us happening like that, then we don't think outside the box. I have to tell you one story very quickly.
please.
I went to it was a business negotiation, and I was in one of the Asian countries with a gentleman, and he was a sales rep, and I was there to protect the risk factors of the contract, and he was there to discuss the aspects of the service that was going to be provided. Now, would you believe this man could only eat at McDonald's? This is a grown man. This is an educated man. This is a well-traveled man, a very nice man, a bright man. But he had accepted a conventionality. I won't say conservatism, because it's not necessarily about being
No,
conservative. It's more of a kind of a conventional mold. And he said, well, because I know what it is.
know what
I
it
said,
is.
don't you want to try something new? I mean, this country offered all sorts of cuisine, for goodness sake. But no, he wanted McDonald's and only that. So talk about shutting down, or at least
Oh,
never expanding that track. Maybe who knows who he was as a child. Some of us are
yes.
more concrete thinkers, some of us are more imaginative, some of us will rebel more, some of us want to conform more. But from what I knew of him personally, and we did have a few personal conversations, it sounded like he came from a family that worked in a very conventional vein. I mean, you had cornflakes for breakfast, right? You would have
Yep.
meat and potato and a salad. That would be dinner
Mhm.
in general. And there's nothing wrong with it. I'm not here to criticize it. I'm simply saying that it's sometimes good to take stock of how we can limit ourselves, or how we are limiting ourselves, by
Which
simply being in convention that way. Yeah.
which really excites me because, as you describe this, it tells me why you talk about the three kinds of tools. And I love the fact that we have this whole area of what I call the sensate, where you're getting information from everywhere. Um, it, because here's a person who is so comfortable that they have literally closed those doors.
Yes.
I
Yes.
often work with economists,
Mm.
and
Hmm.
and they are very they have a very clear sense of what they want to do and a way they do it. And I laugh
Yes.
at them and I say, you are so in your heads, guys, that I have to remind you to go to the bathroom because they'd shut everything else off.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that kind of calcification of thinking, because that's what it can become. It can
Yeah,
become
yeah,
that. You get so A to B to C, A to B to C, and have so much investment in that,
yeah,
that it becomes so challenging to think beyond it, and to accept information. It's just sort of like
yeah.
slides right down as it comes at you. Nothing really penetrates. And again, it's not to be mean to folks that do that, or to suggest that they are always wrong, but it's the limitation of it,
It's
and
the
the
limitation.
inability to be able to move forward through it.
Yeah.
Do you find how do you find in that experience, if I may ask, how do you find them being able to sort of resolve the interactions if there's such an entrenchment? What do you see them doing?
Mm. I use a
That-
lot of I use a lot of techniques. One of which is to tease them.
ah
this aspect. And the ones I've worked with are very, they work on world issues.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a local thing. And so they have great confidence in themselves. And when you're working with people who have high confidence,
Yes.
then you can do a lot of things. Teasing is one way to open. You don't do that all the time. The other
Right.
is to tell
Right.
stories, which you have already done here,
Mm-hmm.
or use a metaphor. Those are different ways in which I work with them. Often I will have them tell stories themselves, and that's
Mm-hmm.
a great way to open them up to other things. But I want to move on to something else, which
Okay.
you said something about thinking, and I said, reflection is something that we have oftentimes in organizations. Just sort of you don't need time to reflect or think. You know what you have to do. Now get to it and do it. And yet I find that when I'm in a difficult situation, invariably you'll hear me mutter to myself, think, Madelyn, think.
Yes.
And I've done that for years. It took me years to figure out that's what I was doing. But it's that moment where you really do click open all those possibilities. I wonder if you
Mm-hmm.
talk about that in terms of these
Well,
tools.
yes, and it's an important part of both the work that I do because, the book that I wrote it so that people could be provoked into thought. It wasn't about having everybody agree with me or want to go into some kind of lockstep process, just the three of these, the seven of that, the 12 of whatever, and then you do that and everything will be fine. It was really meant to share my experience, some of the exposures that I've had and what that has made me think of, and then to encourage other people to expand into places where, as you say, they can reflect meaningfully. Because again, see, you are an individual of the education and the background and the knowledge and the perspective, and you bring all of that to your reflection. Then often people have, because they've blocked a lot of that out or shut a lot of that out, they've only taken whatever someone has given to them. And this is what they've got in their head. And this is what they're working with. And so even when they reflect, it's almost like the component has got to come into that reflection. And that's why I talk about being about the openness. And I will, if we get a chance, I will give some calls to action on this if we have some time
Good. Oh,
later.
yes. I always want that.
Yes, I will mention some things that help to facilitate this openness. And by that I mean these aren't things I'm going to mention that no one's ever heard of. It's just we don't tend to do it. It's like making a decision to be happy. We're just so busy living our lives. We're not making that decision to be happy. And we're not necessarily, and again, not everybody, not all the time, but I'm speaking in generalities, that we don't put ourselves in a position of openness. As you talked about these individuals who have such a strong sense of what needs to be, how it needs to be done, a kind of codification of the effort. There is no room for the reflection or the questioning. And one of the things that I'm able to do when I work on a consulting basis, and I have been involved in the past, is helping, for example, to help leadership to roll out a platform and deal with the how of dealing with that platform. Because again, as I'm not a psychologist, I'm not here to try to figure out why people are coming to the table with the problems they are coming with, or their hesitation or their unwillingness. I'm already in that position where this is what we've got. This is who we've got to work with. This is who the people are. I'll give you a quick example of a story. Somebody came to me and she said, I'm in finance and I have a team. And I have always been the kind of individual who can look more broadly at a situation. I can take variables into consideration. I can look for different options and possibilities. And I have a lovely team of wonderful people, but they are so in the box that if it's not this, or this, boom, you're out. So things that they could take into consideration, they're not taking into consideration. And it's really sort of not only gumming up the works, but gumming up, how the system of finance that they have working can evolve and develop and move forward, because that's another goal for all of us. We're not just making one decision and staying in one place. We want that to be something that can be built on and move forward. And she said she's just ready to do away with them all. I mean, she was speaking in these, violent terms, which clearly she's not a violent woman. But what we did, because unfortunately her company was not interested in doing perhaps a series of, small seminars or workshops to kind of give them examples, do some role playing, do some context that they could see, well, maybe such and such and such and such. Maybe that's something to take into consideration. Not strong arm them into bigger thinking, but put them in context where they can come to the conclusion themselves would be the best thing. Well, they weren't willing to put the money into it because, as you say, it's just get this done, get this out there. We just want this. So she was frustrated. And I said, well, let's do something in the interim. So let's move the box. Let's expand the box. So that's what we did. We came up with a plan of inclusion, which really made it be broader thinking, greater consideration, but they still thought they were in a box. So that's the way she did a little bit of a workaround on that. It's not a long-term deep solution to this issue, but for her expedience of getting certain things done that were expected, right? Mm-hmm. She wanted them to feel more comfortable and not just criticized constantly.
I think that's an incredibly important point that you said, that she did not want to dissuade them to thinking it was impossible for them to do it,
right?
But to actually reward very small shifts.
Yes,
that's a very powerful way as a line manager, that you observe small shifts where it's very safe to move out of the box a little bit. And then you feel more and more comfortable as that goes on.
And that's what, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to change subjects. So.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say that had I had more time to work with them, we would have gone more deeply with that route. In this case, what we did was expanded their comfort level by creating an inclusion in their box. So that's what we did. But
I have to tell you, one of the things that I used to do on my project teams, when I had the luxury, I'll call it the luxury of fun, is I would have one of the team members, I would recruit them as an artist, because artists think differently. They ask different questions. And and it was interesting because the fact that I was listening to them move into arenas that nobody had been talking about gave them permission to also move out. So that was one of the tricks that I have used in the past.
Right. Very good.
I would love to be able to bring children onto teams, because boy, do they ask crazy questions.
Oh, yes, for sure. Absolutely.
As you're talking, I'm realizing you use a term, a rather lengthy phrase. It's perceptual and creative subjective resources of awareness. I read that in your book and I went, oh,
wow.
You know what? I'm beginning to see what you mean. It's about being aware.
Yes. At the bottom line, at the foundation. And see, then all of everything else that comes up, it's that bringing things to conscious awareness. It's so funny. One of the people who reviewed my book, he said, I've never even thought about how I make decisions. I'm like, bingo. Great. You've already the book has served a purpose. If there's nothing else that he would like to benefit from, it's made him think about how he does that. And it is bringing things to awareness, because, so there are a lot of people who do what you do, what I do, what many of the people that I provide as examples in my book of different contexts and different stories, because there are a lot of different stories in my book of different professional and personal situations. There are people who do this automatically. And what my goal was, because the book is a sort of a calling card for the direction that I take in the work that I do. But my whole goal was to bring this to greater awareness for people, so they are using these tools consciously. One man said to me once, he said, well, I don't really want to be thinking that much. I'm like, well, it's not perception. I'm aware of you here to the left of me on my screen. You're sitting there. I'm in a room. There's the light, there's a window. I'm aware of these things, but I don't have to consciously be thinking and focusing on each one of them in this moment. And that's kind of what I'm talking about, a perceptual awareness that, there's a gentleman I work with, and I don't want to mention his name because he is a little bit prominent and possibly controversial in some corners. He has been extremely powerful in many of the decisions that he makes, because he's worked with it all along the way. This is when we talked about in the beginning about reacquiring what may have been a little bit shut down or dimmed down in us. He works with it all the time. So he has his own personal signals for what he perceives and for what it might mean. For example, when he gets into a deal, he doesn't care how good it looks on paper. If something doesn't feel right, he knows he has to pull back or pull out. And furthermore, he has reached a point, he doesn't care if he says no to the deal and somebody else made it very successful where it really worked for them. He said he doesn't care. He knows it wouldn't have worked for him. Our brains have tremendous capacity for understanding and perception. We have learned a bit about that, but there's more that we don't know. It's like they talk about junk DNA. Is it really junk? Or is it just we don't know about it yet?
Yeah.
And there are ways that we take information in that our eyes can see, that we can feel and perceive. And when he knows something is off, he's either, like I say, got to get more information, or just this is not. And if it still feels like it's not going to work, he just doesn't do it. And because he's tried going against that grain, and it has not paid off for him.
Yeah. Yeah. As you were describing him, I kept thinking about things that we do again and again and again. I'll give you an example. As a manager, you're always watching certain numbers
Yes.
on your accounts. And if you're looking at them all the time, you discover, I don't need to look at those numbers. This is the number that I have to look at. If that number is right, I'm golden. And that you can't even articulate it. It's impossible. You just know that number is right when it's right. And that's what you're describing there. And I'm excited about that because there are so many other areas. I mean, I remember it or I think of it as the numbers because that's how I watch the business.
Yes.
But there are so many other areas where I've done something many, many times, and I probably don't even think about the fact that my brain has analyzed it.
Yes.
And gives me those signals. Yeah.
Yes. This happens very, very quickly sometimes. I'm going to give you a story here, which is in my book, but I'm going to quickly go into it. And this is about involving all three aspects of this tool. These tools. This happened in Washington, D.C. It happened at a train station. And the train was coming in to the station. And it was like a Monday morning, train was coming in quickly. A gentleman fell on the tracks. Luckily, he did not fall on the third rail. He fell sort of diagonally on two of the rails. And of course, everybody was panicking because the train was close. And I'm trying to truncate the story. There are all sorts of elements to it. One gentleman who had some mechanical background jumped down, pulled the guy straight, laid down on the track, and the train went over both of them. And it happened. This was in the news. It was all over the place. It was years ago. It was in the news. Now, one of the news coverage that they did, one of the news coverages, they did it on TV, and they must have had extra time because often they'll say, they'll put a mic under the nose and say, "What were you thinking?" And then the minute the person starts to answer, they pull it away and say something else, and they go on. Here, they let the gentleman say exactly what went through his mind. First of all, and this is apropos of what you're saying about how rapidly the mind takes this in. His first thought was, "I can save this man." Now, that's an irrational. It's not irrational, but there's no rational process there being evidenced. He's just got this feeling he can save this man. So it made him go to the next step. And that was his rational thinking. And that made him analyze, well, how could I do that? There's an undercarriage to the train, right? There's an arch to the train. And there was stone in between the tracks. This was outside of the main city where everything was concrete. This was an area where there were stones between the tracks. So there was some space and some give in terms of the stones being there, the pebbles or whatever being there. So he's looking at this and he's thinking, okay, here's my creative solution. I'm a little guy. He's a little guy. I'll pull him straight. I'll lie down and the train will go over both of us. Now, this went through in a flash. People thought, this guy is crazy. Do we have another suicide? What is this? And it turns out the gentleman who fell down, I mean, it might have been blood sugar or something. He just lost consciousness and fell down. We learned about this later. He did just this and terrified everybody because there was no time for them to jump down, try to pick him up, pull him onto the tracks. The train and the poor train conductor thought she killed two people because she's now rolling right over these guys, pulling the train past the station. And he got up and helped the other guy get up. And now, should anybody do this? No. Nobody should be doing this. This isn't something I'm recommending. I'm simply pointing out the process in his mind. He used all three of the elements. And many people do. Usually they'll do the rational first. Then they'll try to see how it feels. Then they'll see if there's something creative. I'm a big proponent of getting the feeling first. If you know you can do something, like this man was convinced he could do something. He didn't know what it was until barely a second later, he's figured out through the the general mathematics of the situation, if you will, how it could work. And then, of course, he had the courage and the creativity to try to do that. And he said he could feel the train go over the back of him. It was that tight. The train just went right over him. Now, amazing, amazing. The reason I tell that story is because it is so dramatic, and it helps remind people of the elements I'm talking about.
Mm.
Outrageous.
Yeah. There's a term that you use, and I think you just told a story about it, but I want you to tell me if I was right. That term is self-trust
Oh,
in
yes.
decision making.
Yes. Yes. And I kind of go on about it, intermittently in my book, because I think self-trust is critical to any innovation in decision making, any acceptance. Because first of all, let's talk about a negotiation. I've done a lot of negotiation work, and we all have negotiation we have to do. I don't care if you're negotiating over the price of something that you're going to buy somewhere, you're negotiating your way through an intersection. And sometimes you're trying to figure out which one of us is going across first. Was a stop sign. What are we doing? You have to kind of feel your way through this. And if you do not have a certain level of trust that you can make decisions, not necessarily about the intersection, but in general, if you don't have that confidence, then it's very hard to go through even the consideration, the stop, reflect, respond, which I sometimes talk about, or I'll use different terms, but that's what they represent. Taking that moment, taking that breath, taking that pause, letting yourself absorb whatever it is that is happening, the comments from across the table in a negotiation, or your own thoughts, and then proceed. Because this can happen quite quickly. Our brains work like lightning. It can happen quite quickly. It doesn't have to be a protracted process. But if we don't have the confidence to take the steps that we need to take, then it's very, very difficult to be able to, discern. I have a friend. I'll tell you another quick story. I have a friend. This is not a client. She's a friend. She's a woman with 2 degrees. She's highly intelligent. But see, her confidence in discernment is incredibly poor. And I'll give you just one very little example. I told her I like eating my sandwich outside in. That's what I like to do. I didn't say I have to eat it that way. I like to eat it outside in. Same thing with a hamburger. I like going outside in. And I said, well, what do you get from that? What do you think? That you're obsessed is what she said. I said, obsessed? No, it's not that I must do this. I'm compelled. Then I've got a real problem. If I have this obsession that any sandwich I see, I must eat from the outside in. No, it's that I like to save the best for last. I like that really great flavor. Now, there could have been some other guesses you'd have made, but obsession wouldn't be the thing you would immediately jump. And she's like that with everything. Her discernment, her ability, her confidence, and her ability to be able to assess things is very, very, strongly impaired. So because I work with the how things get done, I don't work with why people want to do it, or how they feel about doing it. Usually when I'm working with people on this kind of decision strategy work, they come from a place of, they know what they want to do. They know essentially where they want to go for most part with whatever it is. And then we suss out the possibilities and the opportunities. And then they have to rely on their own confidence and judgment and decision making and make the decision. I recently worked with a medical professional, a highly esteemed medical professional, who wanted to discuss opportunities and possibilities in his advancement. And he thought these things through. It's not he'd never thought about it, but we took a second look. Was he overlooking anything? Did he take this into consideration? What about that? And how he felt about it, what his emotional process that was up to him. My job was to make sure there wasn't anything he was missing in the pieces. Yeah. But in the end, he would have to have the confidence to make the decision that he needed to make. I touch upon these things not because I teach people confidence. It's not that but I bring up some of these elements to sort of rough up the soil around people's decision making, right? So that if they need a therapist, if they need a counselor, if they need another resource, there are plenty of people who've written wonderful books. I often refer them to these people who will teach you different steps. And that is absolutely fine. But that's not the level at which I am working. I can see a lot of this. I could comment on it. It's not my place. It's not my job.
Got it. Well, speaking of doing, I think it's time to talk about some of the actions that you would recommend to people. Are there common things that people can do? Are there extraordinary things that people can do, even themselves?
Well, if we're talking about on a very personal level, and you would be surprised, I've worked with a lot of highly positioned people who have very little development in some of the things that I'll be mentioning. In fact, I'm gonna refer to my book on a list of things that I kind of bring up at one point, just as I go into part 2 of the book. First and foremost, back to that awareness. That is something to cultivate. That is something to look at what's going on.
I
Listen to
love
what's
that
going on.
one. I love that one.
It's an important one.
And I have to tell a story about that.
Oh, go ahead.
I once went to a Japanese garden. Now, Japanese gardens are absolutely stunning, especially when they are done by the Japanese.
Yes.
And you want to whip out your camera. And I said, I'm not going to look at this garden through a lens. I'm going to look at it. And then I pulled out my sketchbook and I began to draw. And wow, did I see things in that garden that I never would have seen had I not done that. So that's
Exactly. Exactly. That's a wonderful example. Let me just run through a few here. So listen to the stories you hear in life. Look for and foster the inspiration that shows up as a consequence. Pay attention to your thoughts, however small. Seek the truth at the center of your awareness. Now, we could expand all of these in great
yeah,
length,
yeah.
but these are just thoughts I'm throwing out to people.
Mm-hmm.
Explore new ways of doing things that you already know how to do. Try new things and explore the unfamiliar in general. Allow for new ideas and new options to come into your mind. Let yourself see in new ways. Explore new perspectives for what insights they may offer. In fact, I think of Jack Nicholson, who was caught reading a very conservative book at one of the Laker games. And someone said, "Oh, what are you reading that for?" He said, "Because I like to know where people are coming from and why they think the way they do," right? So let yourself take time to imagine and be creative. You gave an example of exactly that. We all have creativity, often undiscovered or undeveloped. And I have a couple more points here. Do contemplation exercises. We didn't have time to talk about that. I mentioned it in my book. It's sort of in between just sitting and imagining things and going into meditation. It's sort of an intermediate step where you kind of give your mind the freedom to ask the questions that you might need to ask. Stay open. This is a very big one.
Yeah.
And then my final blessing to everyone is live as if success is inevitable. If one thing doesn't work, another thing will work. Very quickly, I will just mention this story. I wanted to get this in. This is a woman who became a research scientist, an eminent research scientist. And this is because she failed her medical school exam in a foreign country where only one time is permitted. You're only permitted to do this one time. And she failed. It was very embarrassing. She could have thrown herself into regret. She could have done, and lived in that emotion, which would have gotten her nowhere, really, because that emotion doesn't build on anything. It's very human and very normal. But no, she rolled up her sleeves and said, "No, I'm going to go into science." And she is now in an area of science where she is helping millions of people. So bear in mind, a failure in one direction or a perceived failure or what you think is a misstep because you weren't ready, you somehow couldn't take the right step. That's not the end, not if you don't want it to be. And sometimes it can be the best thing that happened to you.
Okay. I love that final thing. But I have one more thing to ask.
Okay.
You have a chapter called Chicken Little.
Yes.
And the dilemma of the falling sky. Now, in it, you ask the question, so do you worry about the sky falling? And I thought about that because it's a lovely way to force your reader to really consider the possibilities. Now, when I asked the equivalent of that question
Mm-hmm.
of a friend of mine in Jeddah,
Mm-hmm.
he said, I would plant a tree. I'd like your
Yes.
thoughts.
That's lovely. That is so lovely. And see, it depends what that falling sky is about. Sometimes we get caught up in our fears, our insecurities, and the perceived dilemmas. And that does go hand in hand with notions of regret and there's a lot that could be packaged into that bundle. But that sky is falling, that running around, that idea that that everything's crumbling, it's not going to work. I'm at that point where it's caving in on me. And the truth is that's actually rarely the case. Now, there could be some circumstances where the sky is really falling in on you, but generally that's not it. And if we give ourselves the richness of possibility and opportunity and generosity and doing wonderful things like planting a tree, we can get so much further with ourselves and our own lives and together collectively.
Danute, thank you so much. This has been such an exciting conversation.
It's been fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Every now and then, there is something that changes how I think about the world. Grounds for Thought is a place where I talk about these moments so that you can explore the meaning for yourself. As a researcher myself, I have deep respect for those who draw from their own research. Brené Brown is one of my favorite people because she speaks from her own research, and also because she's very funny. When I met her in person, I was amazed. Whether she was on stage or off stage, just in conversation, she was still funny. To Brené Brown, trust is choosing to make something important to you vulnerable to the actions of someone else. To her, trust is built on very small, insignificant moments. She calls them the sliding door moments, where the opportunity to trust also offers the opportunity to betray. And that trust is built when you choose the trust moment. She says that trust really is built on moments, very small, insignificant moments. And she calls those moments marble jar moments. Those moments that have the opportunity to add a trust-building marble into the jar or not. Over time, you hope that the jar gets fuller and fuller, even to overflowing, to those whose trust is important to you. I want to talk about what Brené calls braving. Her framework for building trust by braving connection. Because when you want to trust someone, that's a relationship. It's a connection to that other person. So what does she say? She calls it braving. And we're going to go through each of those letters one at a time. I'm going to try to talk about this in terms of building trust with someone else, but also in building trust within yourself. Okay, the first one is boundaries. She said, set the limits of your relationship. A trusted colleague is not the same as a trusted friend, even though both are relationships built on trust. With a colleague, you might be willing to trust them with some of your business decisions or your research decisions or your writing decisions. With a friend, you might also share with them some of your personal issues. Right. How about for the personal level? How do you set boundaries for yourself? I say that if you really want to work on personal trust, trusting yourself, your ability to make a decision, set a narrow range. Say, for example, that you'll trust yourself what you will eat for breakfast. Okay? I know it's simple, but let's keep it simple. The second piece, I've got to come here and go to reliability. Imagine a reliable scale. If I got on it, it would say the same thing every time. Likewise, you must be careful to take only what you can do reliably. Okay, makes sense. For yourself, it means that if you decide on scrambled eggs, have scrambled eggs. All right, accountability. When you make a mistake, you own it and you make amends and you let me say that differently. You let me do so as well. So, for example, if I really do make a mistake and it offends you or it hurts you, you apologize. Or you otherwise make amends, but you also will let me do that. Now, for yourself, be sure to do what you decided to do. The next one, this one is most interesting. It took me a while to realize it was quite different than what I had thought it was going to be. It's called Vault. And what Brene is saying is, what I share with you, you will hold in confidence and vice versa. So that when you share something about someone else that should not have been shared, you've lost the Vault trait. How many times have you said something to someone in confidence and then heard it back? I remember there was someone that I worked with, and she did it all the time. And I finally said, then this is a good way for me to seed information out. And so I literally used the fact that I could not trust her to keep the secret to share it. And she, of course, was sharing it as if it was a big, dark secret, which gave her creds. That's okay, because it got my information out. Okay, I don't advise that for everybody, but it worked for me. But let me come back to Vault for yourself. I think you need to practice keeping your own secrets secret. You know, sometimes you feel very relaxed and you share something that you think, why did I tell this person that? Well, that's a case where this is something really important to you. It's sensitive to you. It's very valuable. Keep it secret. The next one is integrity. Integrity. You must act from a place of integrity. It means choosing courage over cover, choosing right over easy. Notice it's not right over wrong, it's right over easy. Practicing your values, not just professing them. I became very sad when I think about how our leaders have lost our trust. And it has so much to do with integrity. Now, how do you build integrity? How do you build trust through integrity for yourself? You stick with your decision even if no one else knows it is for yourself. You just say, okay, this is what I decided to do. Doesn't matter who else knows why I'm doing it. It's for me. The next one is non-judgment. I love this one. It means includes asking and giving help. So here's a case that it goes both ways immediately. There is no judgment when you ask for help. There's no judgment giving it. For yourself, this one I think is really effective. If you change your mind, you simply don't beat yourself up about it. You just go on to the next decision, which is very like this last one. Generosity. If they say something or do something that missed the mark, you can assume the most generous about their intentions and behavior. And when they say or do something that we feel misses the mark, we do the same. You just be generous. For yourself, if you mess up, be generous with yourself, knowing it was your intention to make the decision in 30 seconds, even though it took you 3 minutes. Just took you 3 minutes this time. Be generous. My examples are kind of silly and simple ones. But remember that trust is built from very small, insignificant moments. Brene Brown's Braving from Rising Strong. Well, I want to thank you for joining me today and appreciate very much every one of you for being with me so regularly and so loyally. You know, I've just come to love you. That's all I can say. I look at my numbers and I say, that's amazing. There's so many people out there who want to hear who I'm talking to and what's going on. So I want to thank you for that. And I hope that you've enjoyed today, even though it was a little different. And I hope you learned something new. And please click the like button and subscribe if you're on YouTube. I'm Madelyn Blair, wishing you infinite possibilities as you unlock your resilient leader.